Morning, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform. I got the Maggie and Andy show again from IFS. I saw them present at the Unleashed event a couple of weeks ago on a pretty provocative presentation. It's about manufacturing in 2050. And I said, these guys aren't analysts and they have the guts to present 30 years out. I got to bring them on the show and have them do a shortened version of that presentation. So Andy and Maggie, thanks for joining me. The floor is yours.
Thanks for having us back, Vinnie.
So, as Vinnie has just said, we were thinking in the office about the future of manufacturing, and we thought we'd put together a bit of a thought leadership, bit of fun, a bit provocative, to try and get people thinking about what's going to be happening and what manufacturing will look like in 2050. So, 2050. Maggie, do you remember why we said 2050?
Well, actually, Andy, yeah, if you remember, when we sat down, we thought we wanted to have something that's a little bit beyond traditional business planning. Andy and I actually sit with our customers, we call them the customer advisory boards, and have conversations around, what they're up to, what's really the next big disruption in our customer sub-industries. So we wanted to go a little bit beyond the traditional business planning and have a look at what's further out. So we played with the idea of going 2080 or 2100, but then we thought that's a little bit too far out. Let's be a little bit more realistic. And in any case, with 2050, which, Andy, if you just advance a slide, it's actually not that far off. And we also said, with the rate of change that has been happening in the last decades, that rate will even accelerate more. So 2050 really isn't that far out. And then we came across this quote by or this blog that we found in a blog by the World Economic Forum, and here this young blogger talks about the fact that by 2030 everything is going to be essentially ownerless, right? We already see the beginning of that with certain things like buy bikes as a rental, clothing as a rental, certainly cars, and so on and so forth. But now this person is sort of anticipating that everything will be a service. So we're sort of heading towards this servitization, towards this service-oriented future. So not too far off, and that's not even 2050 as per my earlier point.
We thought we'd break it down into 3 sections, and then we went really provocative to say, to be or not to be. It's a parody on Shakespeare, but is manufacturing on the verge of an irreversible change? Is there any, is what are manufacturers going to do to cope with the changes that we think are coming? So we've broken it down into 3 sections. The first part is, are manufacturers facing extinction like the dinosaurs? What does it mean for products? What products should manufacturers be manufacturing? And how can manufacturers prepare for the future? But just before we go there, just a reality check with where we are today. And we can only see this getting more complicated going forward. We've got all of these. I mean, who would want to be a manufacturer today, really, when you think about all of the pressures, all of the rules and regulations, the compliance, the conformance, the costs, everything that's going on, people, cybersecurity, people attacking you all the time from the internet, more and more data coming at you from every direction. I've mentioned energy costs. Inflation is another one that now is beginning to run away. So, and I haven't spoken about the fact that the supply chain during the last 2 years, where we had the COVID pandemic, has become erratic at best, and some supplies are literally stopping, and drying up overnight. So manufacturing today is a very complex and difficult thing to do.
And just maybe highlighting one of these things you saw on the earlier slide, that is sustainability. Now, that is something that hasn't been around for a long time. But certainly nowadays it's gained a new sense of meaning, right? We're getting a lot of pressure from various different stakeholders, whether they're regulators or customers, suppliers, or, you know, sort of financial institutions. Everybody wants to see manufacturers doing something about sustainability and sort of being able to show tangible progress. And one of the things that we at IFS from a product development perspective are doing is to really support our customers on their journey to transform from the linear economy that's a waste focused economy all the way to a circular economy, whereby which products can be really repurposed to their maximum phase, where we have enough insight into the life cycle of these products to really understand how many times we can repurpose them, get them through that circle as many times as possible, and understand how we need to price these products down the line, and really understand also who our customers in the future are going to be. So that is one of the initiatives that we're working on at IFS to enable our customers. And we also very strongly believe that this is going to be the future that companies have to move towards in order to become more resilient as well, because they cannot depend on raw materials and resources like they have in the past before. They really have to become more innovative in terms of how they use these raw materials down the line.
You know, there's a couple of more R's, right? There's a whole returns cycle, and then increasing their rentals. Yeah,
absolutely.
I thought we'd be renting, I guess, expensive apparels and fashions and so on, but that's pretty neat.
Yeah, and it really affects also your supply chain, right? Even sort of thinking about shipping containers, our customers are really thinking now about making these returnable and more sustainable. So it's really impacting a lot of different areas right now.
There is some good news. Some manufacturers have been looking at this and started to tackle the change. And they seem to be the ones that no longer just make things. They've invested in their digital factory, in digitizing their factories, and collecting valuable data. Here you've got an example of a machine that's being driven by a computer, and that valuable data is now being used to try and look into the future, as we've said here. And on the right of this screen, if there's a McKinsey report, it's a few years out of date, but it does show that those that are investing in digitizing their factories are the ones that are making the most gains.
And we completely understand that manufacturers are at various different stages of their digital transformation journey. So some, as Andy has highlighted, they have been making their shop floors more digital, but then other companies have even gone a step beyond that, and they have made digital their business. They have made digital their new value proposition by turning their products into smart connected products. We all know the Fitbit, right, that allows a user to connect with a wider community based on the data that they're being provided on and provided with rather, and they can benchmark their performance against a wider community, against peers, and it's a very interactive way of using a product, and you as a user, not just as a customer and owner of that product, but as a user of the data, you can also feed back to the original manufacturer, right, and on the usage patterns and things you like or dislike. So it's that sort of closed loop, that feedback loop that you now also provide in making this product even smarter than it was before. And you know, in a similar fashion, also we're not talking about the connected toothbrush. It's no longer just a brush on a stick, but it's a toothbrush that monitors the strokes you make in your mouth, that monitors, keeps an eye on how well you brush your teeth, and just think about the data that this connected product now produces, and what that could do, right? You could push that data to your dentist, and that dentist might, sort of call you in when they have noticed that you haven't brushed your teeth very well in a while and see a cavity coming up, whatever. Could also be pushed to an insurance company, right? So there's a lot of different opportunities to monetize on this data, and that makes these connected products incredibly just value add for customers going forward, because a lot of that value will be derived on this data.
The auto industry is beyond connected, right? Acronym CASE, which is connected, autonomous, shared, electrified. Just
You've been looking at our slides, haven't you, Vinnie? Because look at the next one. So what I was going to use here was just that example. I was going to say, if you think about a car manufacturer now, they're no longer making just a car, an automobile. They now have to be able to connect to all sorts of other external sources of information. Sat-nav, for example, it's not unusual to have sat-nav in a car. A few years ago, it was a luxury. Now it's standard. It's like everything. They become, the more they're used, the better they get and the cheaper they get. And soon we will have cars talking to cars. So they'll know they're around the corner or it's braking up in front, and it'll start to apply the brakes. In fact, that's already happening in cars. Some of the higher end cars already do that.
So I've talked about the fact that there's been a lot of change surrounding manufacturers. That change has been accelerating, and we think that this will accelerate even more so down to these 3 drivers. So we think that customers will be demanding even more, right? They're going to be becoming more picky and just more demanding and wanting things in different and varied ways that suit their own purposes. At the same time, we will see digital tools becoming more affordable. They have already done so over the last 5 to 10 years, and they will also advance in terms of their functionality. That will make it more attractive for manufacturers and almost inexcusable to not invest in digital technology going forward. And last but not least, we already talked about sustainability and ESG pressures. Those will really accelerate more, and regulators will really put pressure on manufacturers to demonstrate tangible results, to really show measurable results going forward, and to improve and optimize based on the performance that they see. So all of that will really accelerate everything we have just talked about. So what does this mean for products, right? We'll talk about manufacturers in a little bit, but what does this mean for products? Well, we think there will be 2 big areas of impact. The first one is going to be, and I already alluded to that, is going to be about the fact that more and more value will shift towards this data, right? I talked about the Fitbit. I talked about the value that data provides here. What you see in this example is the Peloton. But remember, the Peloton bike became particularly popular during the pandemic when people couldn't go outside to exercise on their bikes as they knew them. But now the Peloton has evolved based on, again, customer feedback. Peloton now has released this new product called the Peloton Guide. You see this person standing on an exercise mat here. It can, again, connect to this community on their TV screen. But the more important thing is that this person's movements are being tracked, and there is AI embedded in this technology that actually, tracks these movements and then makes recommendations based on the muscle groups that have been trained, and recommends then fitness courses that this person should be investing their time in. So again, this is something that demonstrates how important this data has become in these products, because that they're no longer just sort of things that people throw away. They want to communicate with a bigger community and get more out of it than they have in the past. And then the other thing that we're going to see is...
it must be pretty annoying to have a machine tell you you're not...
Yeah.
you're not sleek enough or athletic enough.
That's it. That's it. It's no longer your friend telling you that. Well, maybe it is now through the technology, right? But yeah. And the other thing that we're going to be seeing is, and this is alluding to our title, really, the fact that things are going to become ownerless, right? Again, this is the vision by the World Economic Forum. We thought we would steal that because it shows a really nice suggestion here. And that is, you know, often when we talk about ownerless things, we often grab towards the, gravitate towards the car example that is becoming ownerless, already has become ownerless. And that is alluding to a finished product. But you can also see that happening with semi-finished goods, right? Think about steel coil, where a manufacturer could go to a supplier and actually access the usage rights for the steel coil. And at the same time, this idea of rental, leasing, subscription, whatever you want to call it, that can also be applicable towards a raw good, right? Where a supplier, a mining company could access iron ore. So the idea here is, you know, to think about making these choices, these buying and sourcing choices more sustainable. And we also know that those sort of customers who have gotten a taste of something that is on a subscription model, they're actually more likely to gravitate towards something that is less ownership based, because it's less of a hassle, and because they also know that the original manufacturer will maintain these services to a maximum standard, so they don't have to worry about the maintenance of that. And it's not anymore a throwaway culture by any means. So these are the two big things we will see impacting products. But let's talk about how this will impact manufacturers and their capabilities going down the line. So how can they prepare for the future? And one of the things that we see happening more and more is the idea of co-opetition, and manufacturers embracing the fact that they cannot sort of exist in these silos, right? If they want to advance, if they want to innovate, if they want to be relevant and successful in the future, they actually have to start working as part of a bigger ecosystem. We'll talk about this in a second. But in this scenario, we're talking about more so technology usage. I already talked about the fact that the price of technology has come down, but we will also anticipate companies sharing technologies to a certain extent. Certainly that's already been happening with 3D printing, where manufacturers might be accessing a factory that's also being used by other companies, certainly their competitors, and there are advantages to that, not only pricing related, but also in terms of helping shape the future of the technology, and maybe to a certain extent liaising with your competition and really driving innovation in that way.
Another thing that manufacturers will need to do is they're going to have an infrastructure that can scale. They're going to have to be able to cope with more data. Looking at this example here from Tech Jury, in 2021, machines were putting 40% of the information into the internet, and the humans were doing the other 60%. By 2025, which is only 3 years away, it's going to flip the other way. That's the estimate, that machinery will be putting 60% of the data into the cloud, into the internet, and the human contribution will reduce.
But mentioning the metaverse here, it's been much talked about. Some people think it's far, too far out in the future. But actually, one of the exercises that Andy and I do once a year is we go to Hannover Messe. You would know this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, manufacturing exhibition in the world. And we see now technology suppliers offering metaverse technology. And the nice thing about this is that you actually maximize your data usage. In this case, you see a real machine that is rendering a virtual image, and that allows people in sort of different locations partake in this virtual platform, intranet, whatever you want to call it. A lot of different use cases you could consider all the way. Go ahead.
As you were walking around Hanover, did you see more use cases in field service or on the shop floor? It seems like field service, I mean, augmented reality has become a big part of that. Did you see plenty on the shop floor too?
Certainly a use case for IFS field service, Vinnie, but in this case, it's actually very shop floor related. It could be used for all kinds of simulation purposes. We could be looking at training, right, reducing the time, and also dealing with potentially hazardous types of situations where you might want to fix something not in the physical environment. So this is actually becoming more shop floor focused, and that's great because there's a lot of innovation and optimization potential that we haven't tapped into yet.
I think, Vinnie, one thing there with the metaverse is there's no camera there. That's been completely rendered from digital models. It's not augmented reality. It's the metaverse. It's completely virtual. So there's no camera there, and that's what we're trying to say. That it's right at the front at the moment, but I think it will become more and more used as people get more and more used to it.
Yeah, so manufacturers should keep an eye out on that.
Manufacturers are going to have to get closer to their end customers. And by using all of the data that's being fed back, they've got this opportunity then to fashion new products, improve existing products. They can even use that to identify a gap in the market, perhaps. There are requests coming for something that they don't supply at the moment, which they could do. Looking at those products, because we think they're going to be on a subscription basis, they need to have a more reliable product. And by having a more reliable product, they'll have to design in reduced downtime to improve that serviceability for their customers.
But there's also a big movement towards becoming part of this ecosystem. And by this ecosystem, I don't just mean customers and suppliers, but also talent and sort of other important stakeholders. And that has a lot of benefits. We've seen it now with the supply chain bottlenecks that manufacturers are going through, short new supply chain. That is something that brings a lot of benefits because you can now really harness local businesses. You can get greater control over these suppliers and just instill more reassurance in being able to supply to your customers. It also helps you with your sustainability efforts by reducing your carbon footprint. I talked about getting closer to talent. If you can manage that during times like that, it will come with great benefits because we're facing a huge talent issue. So if manufacturers sort of also get physically closer potentially to their customers, potentially by going more towards urban settings, we see that being a trend that's being talked about as well. You can, sort of connect to that talent and make the workplace a bit more attractive, and at the same time also get more proximity to your end customers. So there are a lot of benefits towards moving closer and becoming more collaborative with this wider ecosystem.
So I think what we've tried to show you is that, excuse me, back in slide 10, we talked about the traditional toothbrush, which originally was just a brush on the end of a piece of wood. And now that it can be an electronic device which is connected to the internet, which is connected to your phone, and it basically, you're not, as a manufacturer, you're not now just making a product. You're making a product with connectivity to external things like software providers. You're going to need to go into partnerships. You're going to have to offer service, perhaps. So you're going to come into creating ecosystems of products rather than just manufacturing a part. So the future of manufacturing really is, we think, is going to be ecosystem driven. So the key takeaways, I think, for this is the future for manufacturing is about data and more data and even more data. And then with all that data, you've got to be able to contain it. You've got to have the infrastructure that will grow as the amount of data grows. And then having all that data, you then need to be able to analyze it and do something with it. As a manufacturer, you should be open to innovation and not be afraid of new technologies. Perhaps not take them straight away, but be aware of what's coming. And as the prices drop, as more and more of these new innovations are made, robots are now a lot cheaper than they were when they first came out. They're a lot easier to program. And so they become more affordable for perhaps smaller manufacturers. As a manufacturer, you should also identify the people that you can partner with that will move your product from this just being a product to being an ecosystem of product, if that makes sense. But the right partners can help you with the software, the programming, the electronic side if you're not an electronics manufacturer, so they can help you and create new value propositions. And I think the final thing for this is that manufacturers need to foster a collaboration of trust and transparency within that ecosystem. Having built that ecosystem and working with the right partners, you've got to be open and transparent with them. You've got to be able to trust that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and that they can trust that you're going to do the same. And if there are any issues in the supply or anything in the design, that you're open enough to be able to talk to each other about it and catch those things quickly, because the speed of change is quite high at the moment.
How do you, on the last point, Andy, clearly we've become so dependent on China, and you talk about trust and transparency. How do we build that given that scenario? Is that something you looked at, geopolitics? And
I was going to say, actually, it's happened since Unleashed. I was at a manufacturing leaders event just last week, and this was one thing that a lot of the manufacturers were talking about, and they were finding that they were bringing their manufacture back closer. There were two reasons for doing that. One is they can work closer with them and they get that transparency of what's going on. And two, it also helps for sustainability in the fact that there's shorter logistical distances between.
shorter supply chains too, right? So that's
they're bringing the supply chains back towards it. I mean, one customer there, one manufacturer there said that he brought a lot of the work in-house because he got control of it then. I'm not saying that's right for everybody, and that's not actually what we've been saying for this here, but you need to partner with people and then talk about where the best places are to get product from. It may not be the cheapest anymore, because you're not looking for that price. Price is not necessarily the driver anymore. It is important.
Yeah, lean has its limits, as somebody
Lean
said.
has its limits, and again, lean does lean have a place in the modern manufacturing?
Sure.
I think it does, but in a slightly diluted way, shall we say?
Yeah, responsiveness is far more important.
Yes, and a responsiveness or agile, resilient, those sorts of words were being bandied around a lot.
Oh, fantastic! This is great. This sounds like it's not 2050. This sounds much sooner than that.
Potentially so, Vinnie. Exactly.
I mean, yes, why not? I mean, yeah, it depends on the rate of change and if we get anything like a war or another pandemic, which will
the next disruption.
The next big disruption. I was trying to avoid saying big disruption, but that's basically, something could happen. But I think that very disruption, the good thing about it is that it's made people start to do risk assessing more than they used to. Now they got comfortable with the cheap product. They're driving the prices down so they can keep the margins up. Now they're not thinking like that. They're thinking about, how's it coming here? How do I protect my supply? Do I put all my containers on one ship, for example? Those sorts of questions are being now asked by manufacturers because of the pain they've gone through and are going through still, some of them, from the last disruption, the last 2 years disruptions.
I wrote a blog yesterday where I quoted a McKinsey study recently, which said they saw during COVID, the rate of change, companies become so able to do things in 2 weeks that they thought would take them 2 years, right? That's curbside pickup in retail, telemedicine and healthcare and so on. And so their projection is we may be entering probably the most innovative decade mankind has ever seen, right? That rate of change, we've shown we're able to cope with it. It's better to be changed rather than be surprised. So
yeah, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on companies that invest in new technology to shorten that return on investment. And with that, I think that really will push the rate of innovation at companies, to your point, Vinnie. So absolutely, I think there's some really exciting times ahead.
fantastic. Well, listen, go get some turkey in the UK. That's what I plan to do this week. This has been very, very invigorating. Thank you, Andy and Maggie. I need to bring you back to continue the Maggie and Andy show. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.